series on spiritual growth. And last week I tackled, what about spiritual growth of a church? And what we did last week, just to very quickly recap, I really looked at, from a biblical point of view, what is church? Because we really don't see in the Bible what we would probably conjure up as church. And so when we looked at the Old and New Testament, I came up with this. From a biblical point of view, the church is made up of people who have been called by God to separate themselves from the world, to have a loving union relationship with Him and with each other. And in their devotion through faith in Jesus, they've committed that they are going to make God their ruler. And so when they do that, that is together how they become the church. The church, that's why I said, is one of the most visible parts, I believe, of our Christian theology. The church is there to reflect and reveal the glory of God and the glory of His Son. And then I said the church is a group of people called together, and so what should that look like? And I went through 10 characteristics. I said there should be a hunger to hear from God, there should be a sense of wonder and expectations, unexplained blessings, community, outward focus, laughter, being real, celebration, and a good reputation, and then adding numbers. And I finished last week with this, with the question, if God has called us as a congregation, if this word ecclesia is right, if God is the one that has called people together to set them apart to be together, to have a living, loving union with Him and each other, and if God has done that and allowed us to serve Him to fulfill those promises that He made, how do we do that? What is our role in that? What attitude or actions do you play in generating this thing we call church? What actions and attitude do you bring to reveal God's glory as part of this called out congregation? And I want to start off by saying today that if you don't like hard questions and confronting questions, today is not for you. I mentioned last week that I didn't do a so what. Today is all of so what. And that's why I say today isn't everyone's favourite topic. In fact, at times when this topic is preached, some people get upset. I'm looking at what action and attitude that you should have to this church, and it is this: commitment. Commitment. We are a core group of people. We are a called out body congregation, and so the number one thing we should have is a commitment to that body, to that congregation. And now you may think, why would church commitment not be liked? I mean, how can anyone get upset about hearing about being committed to a church? Because it's God that does it anyway. Well, I think being committed to a church, sadly, over the years has weakened. People don't have that passion as much as what they did before. But as I said last week, we need to rediscover the truth that we are a church that God has established. We are a church that God has put together with a purpose in mind. And we need to realize that everyone is part of that purpose within that establishment. I mentioned last week how the church conjures up all different kinds of thoughts and feelings for different people. But I said everything we do in bringing life to this church is worthwhile. Why? Because it's God ordained. Have you ever stopped to think then, is there a right way to come to church? Is there a way or an attitude that you come to church that is going to help fulfill these purposes? Is there an attitude or a way that you can come to church that's going to help you get the most out of it? Is there something that you can do that will help you connect with God and each other on a deeper level once you walk through the door? Now, I know there's no set formula in the way that we come together on a Sunday morning, but I do believe there are some principles that we can adapt. And I also know that from my own personal experience, the way or the attitude I have before I walk into the door 9 out of 10 times determines how I walk out of the door. Now, you may be thinking, why is this important and how is this connected to spiritual growth? Well, it's twofold. As we live out and become committed to God's chosen establishment that he has put us in, we grow. But so does the establishment, and it reaches its purpose. And so today I want to look at 4 ways or 4 attitudes that we can all have that will help us in this commitment to church. The first 2 come from the first reading, and the second 2 come from the second reading. How about we pray? Father God in heaven, I just thank you for who you are. God, you in your word constantly say how you bring congregations together for your purpose to reveal your glory. I thank you for the people that you bring into ABBC. And Lord, I just hope and pray that today as we go through this, that we will gain some insight in what we bring and how we can liven it up even more and be connected to you more and to each other more, and to grow as individuals and to grow as this body, this ecclesia, this congregation that you've brought together. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. How do you come to church? Well, I've got 4 for you. The first one is this: come ready to receive. Come ready to receive. If you have your Bibles, open up to Psalm 63, because you may think, how on earth did he get that from Psalm 63? I want to give you some background because I want to make sure to point out to you that in a way that I'm not saying what the verse doesn't say. In verse 2, David states this: I have seen the power and the glory of God in the sanctuary. The sanctuary, also known as the tent of meeting, you can read about it in Exodus 25 if you want to, but basically this was the structure that housed the Ark of the Covenant. And it was considered the earthly dwelling place of God's presence. It was pretty special. It was pretty unique. It was pretty vital. Anyway, this sanctuary was a place designed by God. In Ezekiel 25:8, it says that he makes the sanctuary so I will dwell among my people and they can dwell with me. It was designed, it was the designated place for the people to meet him, to worship him, to be together. That's what the sanctuary was. That's what David's talking about. Because during David's lifetime, the sanctuary was the center of organized worship and coming together for the Israelites. It was where God's presence dwelled among his people. And for David, when he was in that sanctuary, he said it was a place where he saw God's power and God's glory. But we have a problem. Well, not us. David has a problem. What problem does David have? Where we're told at the start of this psalm that this is a great personal trial. You will see that this is a psalm of David when he was in the wilderness of Judah. Most teachers connect the wilderness setting with either his fight with King Saul or with the rebellion of his son Absalom. Either way, it doesn't matter. Why would he say this? Why is this brought into this psalm? Because it's very interesting. At this time of this psalm, because of his exile, David found himself distanced from the sanctuary. He couldn't go. He was away from it. If you take this psalm at face value, it seems David is saying he had seen the power and the glory in that place, but now during the exile, he misses it intensely. Because of his exile, David was no longer able to go to the place where God's presence dwelt among his people. I think if David had the opportunity to be able to step back to that sanctuary, he would do it at a heartbeat. But he couldn't. He was in exile. He wants that sanctuary experience again. How much so? Well, he tells us. He says this: You, God, are my God. Earnestly I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you. In a dry, parched land where there is no water. I have seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory. What picture is he given? He's given someone like a beggar, someone without water in a parched land, and he's longing to have what he had before. He said, I've seen this, I've seen it in the sanctuary, and I hunger and thirst for it so much. I want it again. Let me ask you this, Catherine. If David had the opportunity to walk back into that sanctuary, how do you think he would do it? Hungry, with great expectation. He would be hanging out to go and be in that place again, to receive and see the glory and power of God again. For David, the sanctuary was the centre of organised worship. It was where God's presence dwelt among his people. Well, now we are that place. It is us, the collective group of called out Christians, in a way, that become today's presence and power of God dwelling among his people. Now I guess you can see where I've connected the dots. And that's why I say a good way to come to this church is come ready to receive. You know, these words of David conjure up so many questions and thoughts and challenges for me. Even as I was preparing this sermon this week, I kept asking myself hard questions. Garth, when you walk through the door on Sunday, do you come hungry? Do I come knowing that when I get together with this sanctuary, that this so-called God's people of Aldinga Bay Baptist Church, do I expect to see the glory and power of God this Sunday morning? Do I expect to be filled? Hard questions. What about you? When you walk through the door, do you come with an attitude of ready to receive? It's a great question. What can we expect to receive from God by going to church? What blessings or gifts are we going to receive by coming together compared to staying away? I mean, here are some honest questions that we can ask ourselves. Is there any blessing or gift you receive at church that makes you want to get out of bed and come to church rather than sleeping in or staying home? Is there any blessing or gift that you receive at church that makes you want to sit up and cling to it and be hungry for it? Is there any blessing or gift that you receive at church that makes you want to stand up and be committed to it and hurt when you're not there? And when you're not there, to think, oh, my soul is so thirsty, it's like I'm in the Simpson desert. Let me give you a practical example. I'm not sure if you're a news watcher. I tend not to be a news watcher. I just think it's all dramatised rubbish. But every now and then, you get something good. And I want to give you some good news, because like we've seen so much war and election and all that. However, there has been some good news on the news. You ready? Get excited, because ladies and gentlemen, if I turn it on, it might work. Sizzler is coming back. I'm not sure if you're the type of person that likes going to restaurants, but I am. And I love the restaurants that are all-you-can-eat kind of restaurants. We were quite lucky and blessed to live in Queensland. It was only a year before we left Queensland that is Morayfield. That was the last Sizzler closed. So we had it, and so many times we'd have friends or visitors come to Adelaide, from Adelaide or other states, and we'd say to them, well, what's something you really want to do when you're here? You know, and we'd expect, I'll go to Dreamworld or SeaWorld or Glasshouse Mountains or Australia Zoo. Do you know most times the number one thing was, I want to go to Sizzler? They missed it. Do you know, I know whenever I'm going to one of these all-you-can-eat type of restaurants, I would prepare myself. How? By not eating much that day. Why? So I could get the most out of my visit. I want to tell you, I went to these restaurants hungry, ready to receive. Well, that's the way I say that you should walk into church. Excited, hungry, continually ready to be fed and to be filled. A Christian that goes to church that way will continually find connection with God in that church. And the more that Christian is connected to God in that church, the more that Christian will see God at work in their own life and the life of the church. That Christian will have the same testimony as David. I've been into the sanctuary and I have seen the glory and the power of God. If we come to God with an earnest attitude to seek him, we will find him. But it's more than just finding him. When we come with a readiness to receive, he will meet us and he will connect with us. And when he does that, when he meets and he connects with us, something stirs within us. What we see in this psalm is how what he saw and experienced in that sanctuary, what he was longing for, well, that was something that was still stirring inside him. But it was more than that. It was something that was even helping him in his wilderness experience. Because we're told what was stirring. What was his response? His response was rejoicing. He says this, because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. I will praise you as long as I live, and in your name I will lift up my hands. I will be fully satisfied as with the richest foods. With singing lips my mouth will praise you. Let me tell you, come rejoicing. Come ready to receive, come rejoicing. Because if you agree with David that his love is better than life itself, if so, rejoicing should be a natural response. Our spirit is designed to rejoice in God. And so when we come together as God's called people, hungry to hear from him, and we hear from him, let us rejoice. Again, let's ask some hard questions. How much rejoicing happens in our church? If I was to ask you on a scale of 1 to 5, what score would you give us as a church at being a rejoicing church? What if I was to ask you on a scale of 1 to 5, what score would you give yourself of having an attitude of rejoicing when you come to church? So when you come through the door on Sunday, does your attitude help the church rejoice? Or does your attitude hinder the church to rejoice? When you walk through the door, are you rejoicing that you are here? Or do you walk through wishing you were somewhere else? And the only rejoicing that you really have on a Sunday morning is when the last song is sung and you're heading out for coffee. We need to come ready to receive. We need to come rejoicing. We need to come like David, not put on. You don't have to put it on. It's a response. You don't come rejoicing because of who you are. You don't come rejoicing because who the people around you are. You come rejoicing because of who he is. Because of your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. I will praise you as long as I live, and in your name I will lift my hands. This is the act of rejoicing, and we'll be filled. And I love what he says we'll be filled with. What's he say you'll be filled with? My soul will be satisfied with the richest of all foods. So you can come hungry, ready to be satisfied with the riches of all foods. You know what that is? Plate loads of Sizzler toast. What happens? God's goodness, his love should stir us to rejoice. And that's what happens. So that's my first two attitudes. Come ready to receive, come ready to rejoice. And now for my final two, and they're from that Hebrews verse. Please feel free to turn over to it if you have it. I've shared at men's group and other times, Hebrews 10 is one of my favourite passages in Scripture. So again, let me give you some background. The writer here in Hebrews chapter 10 is discussing the concept of faith with his readers. He begins with writing by telling how the sacrificial requirements of the law in the past were insufficient because you had to do it year after year. Now, however, he says, because of Jesus, we have one-time sacrifice that is not only sufficient, but it is permanent. It has removed all of your sin. It has opened up your way to God. It talks about the freedom because of what Christ has done. We can now go to him with our hearts cleared and cleansed of a guilty conscience. And he writes, since we have faith in the power and sufficiency that sacrifice of Jesus has done, because we can now go into that place with clear conscience, we need to grow in our faith. But it's not just a personal thing. Growing in your faith, he says, involves others. And he tells us two things that we need to do with others in order to grow. And the first one is this. Because of what God has done in your life, let us consider how we may spur one another on to love and good deeds. My third attitude is this. Come ready to relate. Come ready to talk. Come ready to share. The church is not a building. The church is not an institution. It's not an organization or even a denomination. It's not a club. It's a congregation. It's a called out group of people to come together to live a loving fellowship with God and each other. The closest thing we have from an earthly point of view, it's a family. The church is made up of people who've been called by God, called to be separated from the world and having a loving, living union with him and with each other. And rightly so. We are relational beings. We are created by a relational God. When you walk through that door, you should come ready to relate. Church is not a place we go to. Church is a place we belong to. When you walk through the door, when you come with an attitude of choosing to belong to the family, so in a way, that way you can come ready to relate. It should be like walking into your home after a big day. At last, I'm home with my family. I don't know how you coped with COVID, but you know we still have people that are still suffering from the effects of being isolated at COVID. Some people have post-traumatic stress disorder because they couldn't be with people. I don't know what it was like here. Wasn't too bad in Queensland, but man, I walked into Melbourne and they hadn't been open for 2 years, the church. 2 years. If you ever want to be a pastor, go then, because it was so easy to pastor that church. Everyone was just chafing at the bit to do something. And but man, they missed it. They missed it. What did they miss? They missed connecting with each other. Could they watch online? Yes. Could they listen to songs online? Yes. It's not the same. We are relational beings. Do you know this was one of the main reasons Michelle and I moved back to Adelaide? It wasn't because we studied ABBC and thought this is a great church. We did it because we knew it was time to come back to family. 20 years we'd been away from family. We'd seen things on Facebook, we'd seen parties, we'd seen weddings, we'd seen this, we'd seen that. Do you know what? That hurt. Because we were away. We missed it. We wanted to come back again and be a part of the family. Our church life isn't a matter of just believing. It's a matter of belonging. You and I must choose to belong. When we consciously choose to belong and to relate to each other, that's when true membership of a church happens. Whenever I talk about church membership, whether it's newcomers, wherever, I said this. Church membership isn't a piece of paper. Church membership isn't having voting rights. Church membership isn't attending meetings. Church membership is making a choice to belong to the family wholeheartedly. Take on its name. What does that mean? Go where they go. Believe what they believe. Fight what they fight for. It's saying, I want to be a part of what's going on here, and I will move interstate back to home to be with the family. Now, I'm not saying we all have to be friends and enjoy each other's company. I have Christian friends that I would hate to be stuck in a lift for more than 30 minutes. I'm not saying we have to produce a church that is full of these lovey-dovey people and we pretend we all get on. What I'm saying is it's just as much as we come ready to receive from God, we need to come ready to receive from others. God chose you. God put you in this family. What do you do to relate? What do you come with? Well, he tells us, consider how you may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. I love how he uses the word consider, because that means we have to stop and we have to think about it. Let me give you some more hard questions. Do you come to church with that in mind? Do you come to church thinking, what can I do or say today that's going to spur someone else on towards love and good deeds? I know this can be hard because churches are made up of so many different people. We have some people that you put them in a group of people with 100 people and they just come to life and they thrive. You put another person in that group and they'll end up in the fetal position. Others thrive in one-on-one. Other people hate one-on-one. What spurs one person on towards love and good deeds will do complete opposite to someone else. Hard, yeah, but that's why we have to consider. We have to consider, how can we spur the person next to me on towards love and good deeds? And do you know there's only one way you can do that, is by knowing them, by having a relationship with them. Let me give you some practical things. Ring, visit, ask them, how can I be praying for you? If you're really scared, say, look, I'd love to spur you on towards love and good deeds, but I have no idea how to do it because I don't really know you. How do I do it? Imagine saying that to someone over coffee. And guess what? Tell them how to do the same for you. But don't just limit it to Sundays. We're a family. Have it on your Mondays, Tuesdays, through the Saturdays. Let us consider one another. Fellowship with God must never become selfish. We must also fellowship with other Christians in the local church. And when we commit to coming and relating to God and receiving from God, that's when it all takes place. A Christian without a church family is an orphan. God meant for us to be part of the family. The church is where you and I live out what it means to be Christians towards Christian brothers and sisters, called out people. And now for my final one, and probably the less liked one. Let's not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encourage one another. My final thing is this: come regularly, come often, come as much as you can. You would have noticed that every one of my points today started with the word come. Come ready to receive, come rejoicing, come to relate. Well, to do any of these things, you need to come. It's a bit hard to do any of these things if you are staying home or if you are somewhere else. I heard something a few years ago. It was a joke. And even though it's meant to be funny, but it did bring out some truth. There was a small country town in Australia, and they had a big problem. They had a big problem with a rabbit plague. Rabbits were taking over the town. They'd overrun everything in the town, including the 3 churches of the town. And after, they needed to get rid of them. And so after much prayer, the elders of the first church determined that the rabbits were predestined to be there. Who are they to interfere with God's will? So they just stood back and they let the rabbits stay. The elders of the second church decided that, well, we don't believe that, but we also believe that, no, we can't really harm God's creatures. And so they set traps around their church that wouldn't kill them, where they'd catch them and they would take them outside of town and set them free. However, they did this and they were quite successful. However, 3 days later, all the rabbits were back at church. It was only the first church that seemed from the outside to succeed in keeping the rabbits away. Each week there was no rabbits at the third church. And so the first churches and the elders of the first 2 churches asked, how did you do it? How did you get rid of all these rabbits? And the elders replied, it was easy. We baptized all the rabbits and made them members of our church. Now we only see them at Christmas and Easter. As funny as that may be, I think the person who came up with that joke wanted to make a point. a point of a problem he saw. And as I said at the beginning, being committed to a church isn't as strong as it used to be. Do you know the National Church Life Survey now says, and I've said this here, but a regular churchgoer in Australia, you ready, is now up to once every 6 weeks. That is according to our National Church Life Survey. The last one was 1 in 4. It is now up to a regular church attender in Australia goes once every 6 weeks. Holy moly. Being committed to a church isn't as strong as it used to be, but from this statement I see in Hebrews, it seems it's been a problem that's been around for years. This is sad because I want to tell you this. Being gathered together as believers is so much a part of the spiritual growth process. And it is so important. And part of the church's spiritual growth process as well. Grasp this. You cannot grow spiritually without the church. You can't. But grasp this. The church cannot grow spiritually without you. Now I know we do get some arguments with these verses. I don't know if you chat with people about this, but often say, yeah, but what does the writer mean? How often does he mean? How often should we meet together? And others say, yeah, but like this verse doesn't mean Sunday church services. It's an interesting question. What does he mean? How often should we meet together? Well, the Israelites were commanded to go to the temple at certain times and festivals and seasons. The Jews went to the temple weekly. The New Testament church met daily. So when it comes to understanding this verse, we must take its meaning, I guess, from its day. Apparently, some struggling believers were beginning to be absent from the regular assembly. And it seems that the assembly did meet weekly around this time. And so the writer was writing and warning these believers not to stop going to the weekly meetings, because he said some of them were already starting to do it. And so the question is what this normal assembly would be for us today. Well, you guessed it. For me, I believe what he's talking about for us today is the Sunday service. The church service. That's why most people interpret this passage to tell us we shouldn't neglect going to church on Sunday. Don't get into that habit. The word forsake in the Greek means to leave a place or a situation and carry on missing it in a casual manner. As in, to keep going as if it doesn't mean anything. But these people hadn't completely given up on church. They were in danger of it if they continued that way. That's why he uses an important word, the word habit. It had become a habit. I'm not sure if you know someone who was in the habit of missing church, but how long or how quickly did it go from a habit to a common thing? What tends to happen pretty quickly after someone leaves the church is they leave the faith. So quickly. 1 week turns into 2 weeks, 2 weeks turns into a month, and 4 month turns into a year. I remember in Queensland, we had a guy come to our church called Mad Dog. He's an Australian, weird guy. But anyway, he got saved in jail, and he travels around to churches. And this guy is like 7, 8 feet tall and covered in tats, and he's a huge guy. And anyway, when he goes and speaks at a church, he sets up this jail. And it was full on, and it was weird, but he did something that I'll never forget. At the end, he had an altar call, and people with tats, and these people came down to the front and gave their life to God. And I remember he said this. He said, I want to tell you what to do and how to keep going from here. And this is what he did. I'm not going to do it because it's too far and I don't like walking, but he went to the door of our church. He opened the door, walked outside, closed the door. He opened it, walked in, and sat in the front row. He got up, he walked outside the door, closed the door, opened the door, walked in, sat in the front row. He did it 5 times. In, out, in, out, in, out. He said, you want to grow? Do that every Sunday morning. As soon as you stop doing that, he said, you're doomed. And I thought, wow, why don't we preach this stuff? I think this is a part of what the Hebrew writer was on about. Not forsaking the assembly implies that people who deliberately or persistently abandon the Christian assembly are in danger of abandoning Jesus himself. Missing church is a dangerous habit. One of my Bible college lecturers used to say that people are only 2 weeks away from being out of church forever, not going to church forever. Then we also have the other great argument that people say to me about not just this passage, but, about church. But because of what Jesus has done, I can be a Christian without going to church. You don't need to go to church to be a Christian. The big question is, can a Christian be a Christian without attending a church? Well, yes and no. While it's true they can worship God individually at home, this cannot and should not take the place of the fellowship and the sharing with other believers in a regular church service, because as we said, that's what God has designed. That's what God has called together. If someone says, I can be in the family of God but not go to church and be a part of the family, to me that's stupid. That's like saying, I'm a football player but I'm not going to be in any club or play for any team. It doesn't work. I know when people say to me, you don't have to be a Christian to go to church, they'll say, I'm a Christian, I still believe in God, but hey, I don't want to be involved in church, because they're just full of hypocrites or whatever. If someone says to you that, let me give you this tool. This is the way I always answer these comments. I always respond the same way. I say to them this: that's great you still have a belief, but tell me, what are you doing for God now? How is he using you? And they reply, well, my friends still know I'm a Christian, and my work colleagues know I'm a Christian, and I share the gospel with them, which is the answer I'm hoping for. And I say, great, that is fantastic. But tell me, what if one of your friends, or what if one of these colleagues accept Christ and they become a Christian, and they ask you what they are to do now? What do you do with them? Where do you take them? What if they ask for help in finding a church? It's at this point normally they have no answer. When we miss church, we miss out on its benefits. What benefits? Receiving from God, rejoicing in God, receiving from each other. The power to live our Mondays through Sundays is found here. It's interesting to note that the emphasis in this passage about church attendance isn't only placed on what we get out of the assembly. It's on what we bring. And you can't bring it unless you're here. And you know the most important thing to bring to church? If someone said to you, what's the most important thing to bring to church? If you say Bible, no. If you say a prayerful heart, no. If you say opening ears, no. Do you know the most important thing to bring to church? You. You. Bring yourself regularly. Not sure if you've seen it, but I've seen this church sign go around. Church, what's missing? You are. You are missing from church. And so now the hard questions. What keeps you from attending church? A survey of non-church goers says church is boring, it's irrelevant, people are always asking for money, or I'm too busy, I already have something on Sundays, or I feel extremely awkward going to church. But that's them. What about you? What keeps you from attending church on a Sunday? What stops you making church a priority? I've chatted with many Christians about this, and for me, I've put them into 4 categories: sickness, busyness, laziness, and selfishness. Let's face it, we all have times in our life on Sunday morning rolls around and we can't go to church. Enid is in hospital. I'm not going to go and visit her tomorrow and have a go at her because she wasn't in church. I'm visiting her tomorrow, that's why I said that. Sickness. That's a genuine thing. People are away. And oftentimes we have very valid scenarios. But sadly, sometimes it's just laziness or selfishness. And they're the times that's a struggle. We need to be committed to coming to church. We can't as Christians say that the church isn't important for our spiritual walk. It's not just, it's vital. You cannot grow spiritually without the church, and the church cannot grow spiritually without you. If you know people are in the habit, be bold. Ask them, hey, I missed you on Sunday. I don't know what you're like when people say that. Most times we'll think, oh, leave me alone, I don't want to go to church. We should be encouraging people, where should you be on a Sunday morning? Here. Why? Because it's God's plan. We should come ready to receive, we should come rejoicing, we should come ready to relate to each other, and we should come regularly. So not only can you do that for yourself, pray about it, but you can do it for others. Hopefully when we have coffee today, I've given you heaps to talk to people about today. Don't just be scared and run away. And is it easy? No. Even I don't want to be out there now. I want to run away. Because whenever you've got one finger pointing away that way, you've got four fingers pointing back at yourself. As I said, I've spent a lot of time this week asking myself the hard questions. What am I like with Aldinga Bay Baptist Church? How am I stirring people on? How am I loving people? How am I encouraging people? Do I come ready to receive, rejoicing? Do I come expecting to see God's power? Do I come expecting to get 100 plates of Sizzler cheese toast? Do I expect to get the finest of all foods that God has to offer, that David got in the sanctuary and that this writer of Hebrews is telling us?